say good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Mr. DeRosiers, Mr. Wilson, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A few housekeeping items. Please silence cell phones. On the record. Do the attorneys want to, do the parties want to recap what exhibits I have noted as entered into the record, or are you keeping your own inventory? I can quickly run through it with you.
Yes, if you don't mind, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
On the city?
Not on the record.
No, we don't have to. Okay. On the city's exhibit list, I have tab 5, 6, 9, 10, 14, 16, and newly admitted exhibits 17 and 18.
I'm sorry, can you just run through those one more time?
Sure. 5, 6, 9, 10, 14, 16, 17, and 18. And Ms. Stinson, without going on the record, if you want to check your record, make sure we're consistent.
I had two that were, I believe, were missed, which were 4 and 7.
Mr. Wilson, do you have city 4 and 7 in?
4 and 7, he did go over those, and one was the notice of investigation, the other was testimony of Mr. LaFleur. That's the one I objected to, but you admitted it. Yes.
Okay. So 4 and 7 are in also as part of the city's exhibits.
That's what I have.
Okay. And that's verified by Court Reporter Stimson. Okay, and then the union's exhibits that I have in are 25, 31, 32, 39, and 41.
You said 25?
Yes.
That would be transcript of Officer Goins?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and
25, 31, 32, 39, and 41.
yes, sir, that's right.
Is that what you have, Mr. DeRosiers?
Yes, sir.
And Court Reporter Stimson?
Yes.
Okay. So we're consistent. Whatever exhibits aren't entered in today, we'll take out of the notebooks.
Okay.
So I wanted to go over this so we're all on the same page of what's in and what's not in. And what we need to do is get to Court Reporter Stimson so she can make these exhibits that are in and the ones that come in today her record that she produces to us.
Okay. I might add a suggestion, probably when we're finished, the 2 notebooks, she could just have.
Great.
Those,
Okay.
those are already hard copies.
Super. And those aren't marked in. It's a good idea. Okay. We'll give those to Court Reporter Stinson.
Okay.
She'll take out of them, attach to her transcript what has been admitted into evidence.
Okay.
And then I'll take out of my notebook, when I get back to the office, what's not in, and I'll have the same, and we'll get them from Court Reporter also.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
If you gentlemen could also decide what you want to do on closings. If you want to do closings, you can talk about it at lunch,
Okay.
break. Just let me know if you're going to do an oral closing at the end of today, or if we're going to dispense with that and just do the post-hearing briefs. From the pre-hearing conference, I understood probably weren't going to do closings and just do briefs. If that's still your pleasure, that's fine with me.
It's
Whatever the two of you want to
Okay.
do.
I'll talk to Mr.
You guys
DeRosier
work it
about
out. If you can't reach an agreement, one wants to do a closing, one won't, then I'll rule. But hopefully you can decide same.
And one last thing, if, I don't know, Mr. Hayward could let us know, if we needed to go slightly, I mean, I think everybody desires to finish today, and I think we should be able to finish today. And if we dispense with closings, that gives us a little more time. But if we needed to stay just a little bit past 5 to finish, is that possible?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, very good. Any other housekeeping matter?
Me, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good. Well, let's go back to the record then. Ready? Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is John Finnegan. I'm the arbitrator. We started this arbitration hearing yesterday, Monday, December 13th. We're now here again on Tuesday, December 14th. We're in the same hearing room we were yesterday, City Council meeting room of the City of DeLand. It's 9:05 this morning. We covered a few housekeeping items this morning before going on the record, all of which are resolved. So we're ready to start where we left off yesterday with Lieutenant Juan Milan still on the stand, and he's ready for Mr. Wilson's cross-examination. You may proceed, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Arbitrator. Okay, Lieutenant Milan, my cross-examination is going to take a little while. I want you to know there's a lot to cover, but I'll try to keep this moving as rapidly as we can. I'm going to do some from sitting here, and then some I'm going to go over to the podium and replay the video and ask you some questions, okay? All right. Let me begin by, sir, you said on direct examination that you've been with the city for 19 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
How many years did you serve as a road patrol officer?
About 4 years.
4 years, okay. So when was your first advancement in the department here?
Narcotics, 4 years after I was here. I'm not sure the second.
Okay.
So, I was on patrol 4 years, which would have made it around 2006.
Okay. And by the way, Lieutenant, you and I have met a couple of times before today, is that correct?
Yes.
I've been at the department when you've done a couple of IA interviews, is that
That's
right? And you also testified in a arbitration last year, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, you said on the record as well that you, at one point, were a former traffic investigator, traffic homicide investigator, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you recall what years that was?
2012,
And for how long did you serve in that role?
about 3.5 years.
Okay, so we'll just say to somewhere through most of 2015 or so? Okay. And then yesterday you told us that you became an internal affairs investigator sometime in 2018, correct?
September 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. And where did you receive your training to become an internal investigator?
It was a course, PTI, out of, say, Hillsborough Colony. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm sorry, out of,
Hillsborough Colony, Tampa.
Hillsborough County, okay. Was it a course you took?
It was a course,
Was it online or in person?
in person.
And do you know, it was like a 40-hour course, 80-hour course?
I believe it was a 80-hour course, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure. It's been a while.
Okay. If you'll turn in the white notebook to yes, thank you. To tab 35. Let me know when you're there, sir. Okay. Do you recognize this document, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what is this certificate recognizing?
Internal Affairs Investigator course.
The course you just described that you took at Hillsborough, somewhere in Hillsborough County, was that different than this particular course?
And it was not.
So is this the certificate you received for the training?
Yes.
Okay. And so that, you received the training after you became an internal, you were appointed to internal affairs, is that correct?
Correct.
In fact, isn't it true that the very first internal affairs investigation you did was for Johan or Joey Malera?
Yes, sir.
And you remember testifying to that in a similar proceeding to what we're here about today?
Yes, sir.
And you started that investigation in 2018 of former Officer Malero, correct? And by the way, he's now reemployed here at this agency, correct?
Correct.
And so you got your training then in April of the following year, after you became an investigator, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did that course cover the law enforcement officer Bill of Rights?
It did.
Okay. Other than Officer Malero, who has since been reinstated by an arbitrator, you understand that, correct?
I do.
Other than that investigation that led to termination that was overturned, have you had any other IA investigations you've been involved with as the lead investigator that has resulted in a recommendation that led to termination?
I have.
Okay. What other officers?
Officer Paul Turner, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe Officer Jordan.
Officer Jordan, okay. And of course, now your IA led to the termination of Officer Goins, correct?
Correct.
Now, I'm going to spend, well, by the way, before we go any further, I'd like to, at this time, enter into evidence what's been marked as grievance or unions exhibit 35.
No objection.
Unions Exhibit 35 is submitted into evidence as Exhibit 35.
Okay. Now, Lieutenant Milan, how did this case come to be assigned to you, this case involving Officers LaFleur and Goins?
I was internal affairs as the investigator, and this a letter from Don Dempsey came in requesting for us to save documents such as affidavits and anything that we had in reference to Mr. Staff.
Okay. All right, so it was the letter from the attorney that you believe led to you being assigned to this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll take a look at that letter. I know the city had already entered it into evidence, but I want you to turn to tab 4, if you will, of the notebook. And let me know when you're there, sir.
I'm here.
Okay. I know the first page is the announcement of no information. You see that, sir?
I do.
From Assistant State Attorney Amy Walker, dated February 7th, 2019, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in a little while, I'm going to ask you about something you testified to yesterday. You said you had a conversation with ASA Walker, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now turn to the next page, is the letters. There's actually 2 letters from the Dempsey Law Firm. One from a paralegal, 2 pages, and then the next page is a single-page letter from the attorney. You see that, sir?
I do.
Okay. Are these the 2 letters that commenced you being assigned to investigate this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And would you agree that these 2 letters are dated the same day, January 28th? The letter from the paralegal and the letter from the attorney?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And these letters were somehow routed to you?
They were.
Okay. On the letter from the paralegal, dated January 28th, there's some handwriting at the top. Do you know whose that is?
That's my handwriting.
Okay. It says completed 129-19 6 CDs. Do you see that, sir?
Yes, sir.
Then it looks like it cut off on the right-hand side. Prepared time, was that 3-something hours?
Yes, sir.
Is that your way of recording how much time it took you to prepare this?
No, it's not, sir. It's probably the time that I actually did that I worked on this.
Okay. So I know the 3 is cut off. Is that a time or a numerical indication of how much time?
No, that's just the time in itself of what time it was when I actually
Okay.
completed the request.
All right. Now this paralegal on behalf of Mr. Dempsey has asked for all kinds of documents. Did you supply his law firm with all of the things requested here?
I did.
Is there anything on this list of items requested from the Dempsey Law Firm that you were unable to fulfill? Now, I know I'm going to jump around a little bit, but I want to now fast forward, leaving your hand on this page here. And I want to ask you to think about it for a minute. When you brought in Officer Goins for his IA interview, did you afford him the opportunity to look at all the very same things that you gave to the Dempsey Law Firm?
I did.
Did you give him all of these exact same videos?
We didn't hand it to him, we allowed him to actually watch the video.
Are you certain, sir, that he got to see all of these videos?
Yes,
Okay, so if Officer Goins says there were certain of these items he never got to see, you dispute that?
yes,
Okay. Did you keep a record or a log of what documents, in terms of CDs or DVDs that you showed him, or audio recordings?
did I keep a record of it?
Yes, sir.
No, I did not.
Couldn't you easily create a list of, these are the documents that I showed Officer Goins and have him sign off on it?
Could we?
Yes, sir.
We can, but we.
You don't
that's
do
not
that?
practice, correct?
Would you agree that would be a better, more accurate practice to know what you're sharing with the officer?
Can it? Yeah, yes.
So all we have is your word here today that you showed all of these exact same documents to the officer. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
But no way to memorialize or verify it in writing, correct?
No, sir. We normally have them signed for the Bill of Rights and so on and so forth, but not for the affidavit. That was actually.
Okay. And we're going to get to the Garrity and the Officer Bill of Rights issue that you had him sign as well. Okay, now, on the next letter, just turn 2 pages, the letter from Mr. Dempsey. First of all, sir, did you recall receiving this letter as well from Attorney Dempsey?
I don't remember. I remember receiving a letter. I can't tell you exactly whether this is
Okay.
it. Obviously, it's his book, so I'm not.
Is it customary in IA, from your experience now, being there almost, a little over 3 years now in IA, to receive letters like this that are what we call preservation of evidence letters?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you agree that these 2 letters, that's what they're, one is a records request and the other is a preservation of evidence letter?
Yes, sir.
So this is something that you're used to seeing now in your role?
I've seen it a couple times. Yes, sir.
And would you agree that in this letter from Mr. Dempsey, he's not making any accusations that either Officers LaFleur or Goins acted inappropriately in any way with his client? Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
And I know you recall seeing a letter from Mr. Malero's attorney, by comparison, that made a monetary demand. You recall that?
Yes, sir.
This letter's not like that, though, is it? He's not making a monetary demand. He's not even making a claim that his client was improperly arrested or treated improperly in any way, shape, or form by the DeLand Police Department, is he?
That's correct.
He's just saying, hold on to the records, don't do anything with them, correct?
Correct.
And he ultimately used this, wouldn't you agree? I mean, that was his means of working with the state attorney to have the charges dropped. Because you held on to the evidence.
Sure. On my part.
Okay. So back to the letter from the paralegal in the prior 2 pages. It's your testimony that you believe that Officer Goins got to see video surveillance of the defendant in the Sally Port and the booking area and the holding cell as well on the day that you interviewed him.
The day I interviewed him, I actually gave him access to all the body cams that we had in reference to this case.
Well, body cams don't include these other videos, though, do they?
What other videos are we talking
The
about?
videos of the booking area, holding cell, Sally Port, are those body cams as well, or are those separate videos?
I don't think I had those, to be honest with you, though. You talking about the cameras that we have in the Sally Port?
Correct.
I don't think I was able to get those videos on the
Okay.
Sally Port.
Well, didn't you say under oath just a few minutes ago that there was nothing in these 3 enumerated lists that you were unable to provide?
Well, I should have looked at the fact that you were talking about, I was under the impression that we were discussing the body cams, not the video from the Sally Port.
Okay. Well, then let me ask the question another way. Did you ultimately provide these videos that Miss Ulrich, Lindy Ulrich, is asking for in number 3 here.
I did not, 'cause I could not locate the one from the salary board.
So when you wrote the word completed up at the top, is that an accurate representation?
For what I had, what I was able to provide.
Okay. But that one word doesn't tell the reader that you only completed a portion of the request, does it? It says completed.
Correct, and as they come into the police department, I meet them downstairs and I let them know what I have and what I don't have.
Okay. The reason I asked that question, sir, one of your sustained findings is that this officer falsified an official report, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, this letter becomes an official record when it comes to the city, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
And that's your handwriting that you've identified under oath, and you're telling us under oath that it's really not completely accurate, is it?
Correct. And what I mean by that is the fact that I didn't have, again, I wasn't able to get the video from the salary board. I can't provide something that I can have.
Is there any documentation that you're aware of or can point us to where you wrote back to Ms. Ulrich or Mr. Dempsey and said, we don't have the videos of the Sally Port, I'm sorry?
Again, when I actually complete the paperwork, I send them an email, I'll give them a call, let them know that they're ready. They show up and I'll let them know at that time if I had the entire video or not, or if I had the entire request.
Is there any record of that you can
There
point us to?
isn't, no, sir.
Now, let's go to, at this time I'd like to move Union's Exhibit 4 into evidence.
No objection.
Meaning exhibit 4 is admitted into evidence as exhibit 4.
Okay, sir. I'm going to have you now turn, well, before you turn there, are you familiar with the term CAD, C-A-D? Are you familiar with the term CAD sheets? Have you heard that term before? Okay. If you'll turn behind tab 2 in the white notebook. You recognize this to be 2 pages of what are called a CAD report or CAD sheets?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if you notice in the upper right corner, it says page 1 of 2, and the next one is 2 of 2. You see that, sir? Okay. This is the detailed history for, there's an event number at the top. You see that, sir? How do event numbers get assigned, if you know?
Every time a call comes out, they automatically get an event number attached to it.
All right. What I want to point you to, do you have any reason to dispute that this is the CAD history report as it relates to the incident at the Boulevard Bar on the early morning of January 20, 2019?
No.
You have no reason to dispute that?
Correct.
Okay. And when we see an entry on the left like 0054, is this military time, sir?
It is.
Okay. And so we're just before 1 a.m., is that correct?
Correct.
All right. The entry for 0054 at the 22nd mark, well, strike it, let me start over. Would you agree the first entry is hours, then minutes, then seconds? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. At the 005420, it should be about the middle of your page. Do you see where it says any weapons involved? Right above how many subjects involved. A little over halfway down the page.
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that for any weapons involved, question mark, it says in brackets, male, POSS, has a knife?
Yes, sir.
From your police experience, what does that mean, or what does that indicate to you?
You just have to have officer safety, always be conscious that there's actually, that person could be armed.
Okay. No, but what I meant was, I appreciate that answer, but do you understand that to mean male possibly has a knife?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as a police officer, isn't that an indicator to the officers who are responding that they need to be aware that they may be coming into a more dangerous situation?
Yes, sir.
Now, it's my understanding, this would be beneficial for the arbitrator, Mr. Finnegan, but do police officers have their own designated number or call sign?
They do.
Okay. And do you see here that 5C11, this is almost at the bottom of this first page, 5C11 at the 54-minute, 30-second mark, it says LaFleur, Austin.
I do.
Do you have any reason to dispute that his, Officer LaFleur's call sign was 5C11?
I don't.
And 2 lines below that, 5C51, do you see Leslie Goins?
Yes, I do.
Do you have any reason to dispute that 5C51 was the call sign of Officer Goins?
No.
And an officer maintains that call sign while they're throughout their career, correct?
Not throughout their career.
Okay, can that change if they get promoted or something?
That can change if they actually switch from squads,
Okay.
depending on the night, if they need them for different zones. they can-
Okay, so it can change according to shifts or zones?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but on this night, this operator who's entering this information, that person has entered 5C51 as being Leslie Goins, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, just turn to the second page, and we're going to come back to this a little bit later when I play an audio recording. But at the 1.0059, so that would be 1 a.m. at the 59-second mark. Do you see that entry, sir?
What hour are we on again?
1 and 59 seconds.
Okay.
10. You see where it says 5C11 location, DEL comment AM 1015. You see that, sir?
Yes, sir.
What does AM 1015 mean?
10:15 minutes of rest.
Arrest?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what does that indicate to you as the investigator and a trained law enforcement officer?
But if you call off for 10:15, that means that person's arrested.
Who does that indicate to you made the arrest?
It says 5 Charlie 11 on it.
Okay.
5 Charlie 11.
Okay. Does that necessarily mean that's the person who made the arrest, or that is the person who was identified as making the arrest?
Can you say that again?
Does that necessarily mean that that was the officer that made the arrest, or could it be that is the indication maybe relayed by someone else as to who made the arrest?
It could be either. If I decide to call out 10:15 for 5 Charlie 11, I would say 5 Charlie 11 as 10:15.
And we'll come back to this in a moment, but I mainly wanted to ask you about the CAD sheets just to see if you recognized them, and you said you did. Is this, for purposes of your investigation, did you review this CAD sheet?
I did.
Was it a part of your overall investigation analysis in this case?
Yes, I didn't focus much on the CAD sheet in itself, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. But one thing about this CAD sheet, would you agree that this reveals that Officer Goins was responding to a call?
Absolutely.
In other words, he wasn't just patrolling, driving the streets of DeLand, doing just road patrolling, looking for suspicious activity. He was actually responding to a call.
Yes, sir.
And did you understand that he was the secondary or backup officer to the call?
I did.
At this time, I'd like to move what's been marked as Union's Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Okay.
Union's Exhibit 2 is admitted into evidence as Exhibit 2.
Now, I want to turn to the actual investigation, sir. I know you told us you looked at the CAD sheets, that part, but I'm sure there's much more. Can you tell us it just in general terms, and then we'll go into some specifics, but generally, what did you do to investigate the circumstances surrounding this matter?
Are we talking about from point A when I received the letters?
Yes, I think you've covered that. You got the letters from the 2 attorneys, the attorney and the paralegal, but does that still trigger any role by you to do anything other than respond to the public records request and
It does.
preserve the evidence?
Yes.
Okay, what does that trigger next
So
for
we
you?
have a policy that basically says anything that comes through our office, we are to review.
Okay,
At which time I review the body cams, and the affidavit, and the supplemental report.
okay. Do you do that independent of being asked to initiate an investigation?
I do.
So you're telling us even just a public records request and a preservation of evidence letter triggers you to go do some initial review or an investigation?
That's a review. Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that by policy, or is that just your own personal approach to things?
No, that is our policy, to be able to, for us to review everything that comes through our office.
Okay, I understand, and maybe we're hung up on review, but I understand you reviewed the letters and you responded to the records request with what you could provide, even though you said you didn't have the Sally Port videos and those. But again, what triggers your belief that you have to dig deeper into a matter just because of a public records request?
To make sure that what I'm releasing is actually something that, you know, if they ask me for video, I gotta make sure that it's actually by the public records laws, that I don't let something out that's not supposed to be public records law. So we have to review just about everything.
Okay. But isn't it true that what triggered this was a letter or a memo from the chief to you?
This is after the fact. If I actually see something, there's something wrong, some concerns to whatever I actually view, I actually let them know, hey, I have concerns with this, and I present that to them.
So you're saying, I just want to make sure we're clear, you're saying that the letter requesting documents from the paralegal and the letter of the same date from the attorney asking you to preserve evidence, but making no claim of any improper activity towards his client, led you to look at everything and feel the need to evaluate the conduct of this officer?
I had a review, yes, sir.
And you're telling us that's by policy?
That is the policy that we are supposed to review everything that comes through our. So let me go back. So if it's not in policy, by law, if somebody requests, public record requests, we have the laws that we have to follow. So if I was to release anything that's not supposed to be released, the one that's actually going to get in trouble is me, correct? So I have to be able to review everything that actually leaves my office.
All right, I'm going to move on because I think we're chasing our tail here, because I'm trying to get you to tell me by what policy. Is there a policy that you know within Deland Police Department that says if you get a public records request, that obligates you as a lieutenant in IA to initiate looking into the BWC of an officer's handling of an event?
If I'm not mistaken, there is.
Can you point us to that by policy number?
I don't have it on me. I can get that information.
Do you even know it by number off the top of your head?
I do not.
And you knew you were going to testify here today, correct? As one of their witnesses.
Yes, sir.
Now, isn't it true, your role is only to investigate and make findings, but not recommendations on discipline?
That's correct.
And that's what you did in this case,
I did.
okay? Let me have you turn to tab 5 in the white notebook. This is a memo, a single-page document dated February 5th from Chief Umberger to you. Do you recognize this document, sir?
Are we, where are we at again?
The white notebook, tab 5.
Okay.
Do you recognize this memo to you, sir?
It's not to me, it's from,
Oh, from you, I'm sorry. And you wrote this?
yes, sir.
Do you write your own correspondence?
As far as,
I mean, you write your own memos?
I do.
Okay. Now, in it, this is, by my math, I think it's roughly 7-8 days after the January 28th letters from the paralegal and Mr. Dempsey. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, were you making a citizen complaint here, sir?
I was not.
Okay, but you titled it subject citizen complaint, correct?
I did.
And doesn't Deland Police Department have a process in place to respond to and to receive and respond to citizen complaints?
We do.
Okay. Those two letters we just looked at from the law firm were not a citizen complaint, were they?
No.
So you initiated a citizen complaint, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
An internal investigation, yes, sir. It's basically an internal, what I meant to put on there is a citizen complaint. It's an internal, it's not a citizen coming from the outside making that complaint. And the reason why I put it on there was like that was because of the fact that I actually had concerns in reference to what I observed during my review of the body cams.
Well, let me ask you, who checked the box or with the X, initiate internal investigation? Did that come from, because it's got Jason Umberger's signature down there, but did you check the box with the X or did he do so?
I did.
So you are requesting, correct me if I'm wrong, as I read this, as the reader of this, seems to me, since it's from you to the chief, you are requesting to initiate an internal investigation. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Are you supposed to follow the very policies and procedures that you hold the officers accountable to?
I do.
Do you believe you do that?
I do.
Do you think you do that all the time?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to move into evidence what's been marked as Union's Exhibit 5.
Okay.
Union's Exhibit 5 is admitted into evidence as Exhibit 5.
Now, before we turn the tab, though, when you sent this to Jason Umberger, by the way, is that his date or yours down there with the 2519?
That's not my right.
Okay. So the very day you sent it, if we're to assume that February 5th is the day you sent this to Jason Umberger, he signed it, he wrote back and dated it and gave you the green light to go, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now let's look at, you'll turn now to tab 29 in the white notebook. You tell me when you're there, sir. Tab 29.
Got it.
Okay, you just told us under oath a moment ago that you always follow the land procedures, correct?
That's correct.
We just looked at a memo that's now been marked into evidence as Union's Exhibit 5 that you wrote on the subject line citizen complaint, correct?
I did.
What we have in front of us is the actual citizen complaint form that is an attachment, if you see in the upper right corner, to DeLand Police Department Policy 3.5, isn't it?
It is.
This is the citizen complaint form, isn't it?
It is.
It's 2 pages, correct?
Correct.
And it even has a notary section on the second page, if you'll turn, sir,
It does.
where it's sworn to.
Yes, it is.
So you didn't complete one of these, did you?
I did not.
So did you falsify a document
I
when you
did
sent
not.
the memo to the chief and called it a citizen complaint when it really wasn't?
I did not. I actually explained it to the chief when I actually turned in the paperwork. When I told him, when I presented to him the BWC and everything that I had and the concerns that I had, I actually explained it to him. So no, I did not complete a citizen's complaint because it's not. Past practice was an internal issue for us to vote one of these out.
Let me ask you, though, do you understand the nature of Florida's public records law, Chapter 119? By that I mean that you can't alter or delete a public record or it's a crime. Do you know that?
Yes.
Do you know that Florida has one of the most stringent public records laws?
Yes, sir.
And do you know that this memo that you created will forever be in Mr. Goins' personnel file here with the city?
Yes, sir.
And you know that to the reader, would you agree, when the reader sees this subject citizen complaint, it's a reasonable belief that a citizen of the city of DeLand made a complaint about this officer?
Yes, sir.
Do you realize the taint that could be on his reputation? By you simply using the subject line of citizen complaint, when you now told us under oath that it was not a citizen complaint.
That's correct, it's not a citizen's complaint.
And you didn't get any discipline for doing this, did you?
I did not.
You get to wear your uniform today, go back to your office, continue to draw a paycheck, and go home to your family
Actually,
tonight, correct?
argumentative.
I'll withdraw the question. Now, let's talk about, so you write a memo, you take it upon yourself without your supervisor, who you told us yesterday under oath was former Deputy Chief Gary Batten, correct?
That's correct.
And you made it sound like yesterday to the arbitrator, to everyone in this room, that you follow orders, do what you're told, you write your reports as Mr. DeSrozier said, as a good associate, and just let someone else make the changes necessary, correct?
What do you mean by changes that are necessary?
Didn't you say that they can give you input and make changes or edits?
My deputy chief, you're right.
Yes. But the person that got this training started down the track was you, we now know, correct?
Yes.
It wasn't your deputy chief, and it wasn't the chief.
That started the review.
It started
the investigation.
this IA.
I started the review, correct, but I passed that information on to my deputy chief,
Okay.
then who in turn goes over to the chief of police.
Okay. Now, you told us earlier that you understand the Officer Bill of Rights, and you understand what its provisions include, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you understand that there's a provision within the Officer Bill of Rights that says all identifiable witnesses shall be interviewed if available?
Yes.
Okay. In fact, isn't that a part of the actual notice that you provide to an officer when he or she is placed under investigation?
Correct.
Mr. Joseph's staff was clearly a witness in this case, wasn't he?
Not to what I was, it wasn't relevant to the investigation that I was conducting.
Just answer my question. You never interviewed Joseph's
I
staff,
did
did
not,
you?
no, sir.
You didn't even make an effort to interview him, did you?
Correct.
So there's no email of any kind, no letter that you can ever point us to where you even reached out and made an attempt to interview Mr. Staff.
Correct.
You made the decision to not even interview the suspect in this case.
Yes, sir.
And the reason I ask that, this is my first time ever getting to ask you about this case, is here under oath in this room. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
I could understand if you would tell us, well, I reached out to him and his attorney said he's pleading the fifth because of a possible criminal case, or whatever the case may be. But that's not the case here. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes, sir.
You didn't even make an attempt.
I did not.
And let's talk now about this recreation that you did. You told us that a lot yesterday about going out on the scene, you and your part-time subordinate, Sergeant Luis Vasquez.
Officer Vasquez.
Officer Vasquez, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is he a sergeant?
No, sir.
Okay. And he's part-time, you said.
Correct.
And I believe you told us you don't recall exactly when you did the reenactment. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, it's on the report itself, the date that we did.
Okay. It's my understanding it was sometime, it was in June of 2019. Does that sound, do you have any reason to dispute that?
No, sir.
Okay. And then you interviewed him a second time. By him, I mean Officer Goins. You interviewed him a second time on June 7th of 2019. And we'll get to that in a moment. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
No, sir. I couldn't tell you the dates. I don't have them in front of me.
Okay. And you had already done your reenactment before you interviewed him the second time because you tell him about it in the second interview, correct?
Correct.
You tell him about measurements you took. You recall that?
I didn't.
Okay. So we know it must have happened before June 7th, correct? The date of the second interview.
Again, I don't have the
Okay.
documentation, but yes.
All right, maybe this will help you. Turn to tab 24. I'm sorry, 25. You should have behind tab 25 the transcript of the interviews of Officer Goins.
Yes.
The first one, would you agree, on page 1 says April 30, 2019?
Yes, sir.
See that, sir?
I do.
And then if you'll go 9 pages after it, there's a second interview on June 7, 2019. They're numbered 1 to 8, and then they pick up again on number 1.
Yes, sir.
You see that date of June 7 of 2019?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if you turn to page 5 of this second interview, this is middle of the page, page 5. You see where it says, okay, I will tell you, I actually drove Woodland Boulevard, and from 233 feet,
I'm sorry.
middle of the page?
Yes.
And from 233 feet and me driving in daytime, do you see that, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, when you had the second interview of Officer Goins, you had already done this reenactment.
Yes, sir.
Now, when Officer Goins showed up with union representation, and I believe Mr. Cook, who's to my right as the business agent, he was there for that second interview, correct, Mr. Cook?
See in the beginning of
Here, if you want to turn back to the page 1, very top of the June 7 interview, it says present is Leslie Goins, Ryan Burton, and Greg Cook.
Yes, sir.
You understood Ryan Burton to be the counsel at the time for, the in-house counsel for the union?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Before this interview started, did you provide any new information to Officer Goins to review? Any new videos or anything?
I don't recall whether I did or not, to be honest.
Okay. Well, one thing, and I trust your answer here under oath, one thing we know you didn't provide to him on the second interview was any sketches or drawings or measurements. Is that correct?
That's correct. As far as hard copies, letting them know that,
Yes.
no, I didn't take any hard copies or anything like that.
Any notes that you made from your field interview? Field reenactment. You didn't show him any of those, did you?
No, I don't think I took any notes, to be honest, other than the fact that the measurements, and I kept them on what they were.
Even when you mentioned the 233 feet that day to him, did you show him on a piece of paper, sketch, or anything?
No.
So you just gave him a number off the top of your head?
Well, it wasn't the top of my head. The measurements were taken. It wasn't from the top of my head.
And you expected him to just believe that with no documentation to support it. Correct?
Correct.
His job's on the line, and you expected him just to say, well, I drove it and it was 233
Yeah,
feet.
argumentative.
Is that right?
Hang on, there's an objection.
Okay.
Argumentative.
This is cross. I'll try to rephrase it.
Okay. If he's rephrasing, then
Okay.
objection.
So, when you mentioned the 233 feet, that's a number you gave him verbally, but you didn't show him anything to support that.
Correct.
And you're a former traffic homicide investigator, correct?
Correct.
And you were trained when you, in that role, which I believe, that's why I asked you that right out of the gate today. I think you said you did that for 3 years.
Yes, sir.
And part of your training as a traffic homicide investigator is to, in part, is to do reenactments, correct?
Correct.
And you learn how to, far better probably than any of us in this room, how to illustrate and describe and draw things, correct?
Correct.
And you knew that you were interviewing this man on now an allegation of untruthfulness. That's where you were headed, correct?
Yes, sir.
When you brought him in on June 7, 2019,
That's correct.
you had some suspicion that he wasn't telling you the truth, correct?
Correct.
And as a law enforcement officer of 19 years, do you understand the implications of being charged with untruthfulness in law enforcement?
I see the seriousness, yes.
It can be a career killer, can it?
Yes.
And that's, in fact, we now know that that has happened to Officer Goins, correct?
Correct.
So despite knowing that you are now headed down a path of questioning him about truthfulness, and a former traffic homicide investigator, you took no measurements when you did your reenactment, correct?
I did take measurements, that's why it says 233 feet on there.
But we're sitting here now in a trial, essentially, and you don't have a single document to point us to support the 233 feet, do you?
I do not.
And yesterday, I heard you say under oath 190 feet. Do you remember that?
Okay, yes, sir.
Not okay. Is that
Yes,
what
sir.
Is that what you said?
Yes, that's what I said.
Okay. So was it 190 or was it
There was
233
a
feet?
couple of measurements that were actually done that day.
Neither of which are recorded.
They are recorded
Where?
on the report in itself.
No. I'm not talking about on the transcript that we just looked at, page 5 of your words coming out of your mouth. I'm asking you, is there a document that you have that shows that measurement?
That 233, are we talking specifically?
Yes, sir.
No, there's not.
So when you question him as an IA investigator, you didn't have any underlying facts other than your own going out in the street and doing a reenactment with Officer Vasquez.
That's correct.
And by the way, I've thumbed through that whole IA. Was Officer Vasquez ever questioned?
In reference to,
You used him as a role player in a reenactment
I actually
to determine, wait, let me finish. Correct me if I'm wrong. You used him as a role player in a reenactment to establish facts to support your IA investigation, correct?
That's correct.
So he became an identifiable witness, correct?
He's an investigator.
But you used him in the investigation.
I did use him.
You told us yesterday under oath in this very room that you used him as a role player, correct?
Correct.
One of you played the role of Officer Goins and the other played the role of Officer LaFleur,
That's
correct?
correct.
And you don't believe, based on your training as a investigator,